Welcome back. So it's my pleasure to introduce the next panel. This is going to be a hybrid panel where you have some presenters that are with us virtually. And I've never done this before, so I'm looking forward to that a lot. But this is our morning panel on ensuring diversity and inclusion in building digital talent. And I'd like to welcome our speakers and panelists here. Starting at the end, our moderator is Diana Villamaria from Case Western. And next to her is Rebecca Sina from Highland. And right on my right is Michael Lalich from Team Neo. And we have joining us virtually Charlene OHanlon from Activate Marketing Services. Right. And Rochelle Williams for the National Society of Black Engineers. And with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Diana, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ed. Thank you also to Lee and everyone who's organizing this conference. Thank you, Youngjin. I know that you're having a wealth of information that is being shared and discussed here today. Our panel today is on diversity in tech, and we have a fantastic group of panelists here. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone. I am Diana Villamaria, Department Chair of Organizational Behavior and KeyBank Professor at the Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University. And it's really my pleasure to convene this panel to help us to discuss a little bit about nuances in diversity in tech. I would like to just take this a minute to just have each panelist introduce themselves. And then we have some prepared questions that we'll share and start off. But really, the purpose of this is to engage in a dialogue and a chat with each of you, both the people in person here as well as the people online. I know some questions will be managed around the chat in case anyone online has questions for our panelists as well. So welcome, and now it's our time to introduce our panelists. I'll start with Rebecca, who's here on my left.
Thank you, Diana. And hello, everyone. I hope you're having a good day. Awesome. So I'm Rebecca Sina. I'm with Highland Software. I'm a cloud delivery manager, and I'm also the president of the Highland Pride Alliance. I've been with Highland since 2008, and I'll keep it that brief. How about that?
That's wonderful. Thank you. And Michael.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning still. So I'm Mike Lalich. I'm the director for the tech industry at Team Neo. So Team Neo is a regional nonprofit economic development organization. We are the Northeast Ohio partner for Jobs Ohio, which is the state of Ohio's nonprofit economic development group. So we cover about 40% of the population of the state, about 4 million people, and my role is basically to promote the growth of the tech industry locally and to help companies find the talent they need, find the office space they need, and find any other resources they need to grow here.
Thank you, Michael. Charlene.
Hi, everybody. I'm Charlene OHanlon. I am a VP and Managing Editor at Activate Marketing Services. I'm a journalist by trade, been in the tech industry, covering the tech industry for the better part of 30 years. I served as the host of a streaming broadcast series called Tech Strong Women. That's on Tech Strong TV, and that celebrates the successes of females in the technology industry. Talk about not only the challenges, but also the accomplishments. And it's always a great conversation, and I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for asking me to be on the panel.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Charlene. And Rochelle.
Greetings, everyone. I am Rochelle Williams. I am the Chief Programs and Membership Officer at the National Society of Black Engineers, and we are headquartered in Alexandria, Virginia. So great to see you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right. Our first question goes to Mike. Mike, what is the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion in tech?
Sure. So I think a lot of people in this room are probably familiar with the argument that in order to best serve your diverse customer base, it helps to have a diverse team, so you understand your customers' unique perspectives. But I think, especially coming from my perspective over the last couple of years, the talent crunch was tough before the pandemic, and it's even much worse now for a lot of tech employers. That just to kind of give you some statistics here on the problem, In Cuyahoga County, 30% of the population is African American, but African Americans make up only about 9% of the tech workforce. So as an employer, you're leaving out about 20% of the potential talent pool for that could be great workers for you. So, by investing in recruiting from people from diverse backgrounds, that helps your bottom line and helps you be able to take on more work and grow. Employers have to be more proactive in the past. You can't just keep doing things the same way and think that the problem will be fixed. Are you in K through 12 institutions talking to kids about tech careers that might not think about that? You don't necessarily need a PhD in computer science to go into tech. There's all kinds of other ways that you can get into a tech career or STEM career. Are you working with and mentoring freshman college students in the region? We know a lot of students go in thinking they want to go into a STEM field. They struggle in some of their first few classes and they drop out and go into something else. So that's another place where if we could increase retention in some of those programs, that could increase the potential workforce. And then with your existing workforce and your existing team, are you using skills-based hiring rather than just requiring 4-year degrees for everything? Are you being more flexible with your job requirements? And maybe thinking outside the box a little bit on what you actually are looking for, not just what kind of your traditional requirements have been. And then also we've had a lot of employers that are finding diverse talent that's already on their team, but maybe in a non-tech role, and finding ways to send them through a coding boot camp or through some additional certifications or programs, and to kind of shift them into a tech role. And like in Ohio, we have programs like Ohio Tech Cred, and there's some apprenticeship money and things like that to help employers actually offset the cost of doing some of those things. So really the argument is, in order to grow as a business, talent is a huge issue right now for employers, and if you can't, expand the potential workforce and the potential talent pool for you, you're going to struggle. So by going after more diverse talent, it'll help you do that.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. That's a great summary of all of the different things that are happening here in Cuyahoga County, as well as in the broader tech workplace inclusion efforts that are going on, literally, nationally, globally, even. Rochelle, how do we think about justice and technology simultaneously?
Yeah, I would really love to just really follow along with what Mike was saying and just understanding, like, I have the privilege of working with over 15,000 students and professionals who identify as African American or a person of color at the National Society of Black Engineers. And one of the biggest things we've seen since 2020 is just students really not accepting the norms. They're not accepting going into workplaces who aren't fully supportive of their identity and all of their intersecting identities. So when we think about the business case for DEI in the workplace, it's also thinking about the fact that students are not going to stay in these jobs if they do not feel like they belong. And that's something that I believe a lot of companies need to get on board with in how they approach the topic of DEI. And also out of that, in answering your question, Diana, how do we think about tech and justice synonymously? It's really just this paradigm shift in how we teach the curriculum, how we present diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we go through it with the lens of justice, not just stopping at diversity. So it's also thinking about how do we think about this in the engineering design process as well. So when we think about removing the bias out of the engineering design process, a part of NSBE's mission is to increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers who excel academically, succeed professionally, but most importantly, positively impact the community. And that is something our members take seriously. So if we're thinking about positively impacting the community, then we're thinking about how do we create technology and how do we do innovation that positively impacts the communities in which these students are coming from. And so the goal here for us as an organization is to really make sure that we are linking justice along with the innovation in the design process. And we've just started out as low as 3rd grade, just revamping our summer programming to include areas of justice in tech so that they understand from a very young age how they can think about being innovators with their communities in mind.
Thank you, Rochelle. Charlene, how has remote work and increased flexibility helped with DEI efforts?
Well, yeah, this is a really interesting topic because, and it's one that we actually covered quite a bit on Tech Strong TV and Tech Strong Women. When the pandemic hit, it forced us all out of the office and into a work from home experience, which was, we all know, it was basically a crapshoot for a lot of organizations, especially those who didn't have any remote work policies ahead of time. But as it turned out, remote work actually had a dramatic positive impact on productivity, and mostly because people finally got to work on their own terms and on their own schedules. But it's also, and I don't know if it's a direct result of or ancillary, but it had a real great impact on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So anecdotally, a lot of the things that kind of hindered folks from coming into the office, the requirement that people had to work in an office, that no longer applied during the pandemic. So, and that had a dramatic impact on a number of groups, including women who still shoulder the majority of the childcare duties, and people who have physical disabilities or mental disabilities that prevent them from being able to commute or being among groups of people in an office, and people who just live too far away to be able to commute daily to an office. And work from home also helped organizations choose from a broader region. So we didn't have to really worry about what a commute was going to look like for employees in all areas. Those who were current employees, they benefited the shift to remote work. We know that the playing field was leveled thanks to Zoom. Everybody's got the same size square face. There's not one that's larger for the president and smaller for the secretaries. And we all see a lot more of our authentic selves on Zoom, which is kind of, I think, as I said, it leveled the playing field, but it also kind of gave us a new perspective on who we work with. When I'm at work, if I'm in an office, I'm Charlene at work. But if I'm on Zoom, I'm Charlene. I'm Charlene, the mom whose kid walks behind me. I'm Charlene, who likes to wear silly T-shirts while I'm working. It's Charlene who likes to play the drums. It's Charlene whose stepdad lives with her. I'm all of these things on Zoom. I wouldn't be that person in an office in a traditional setting. And I think that has helped a lot of, especially underrepresented groups who felt like they had to be a particular persona or fit a particular image. That's helped them to be a lot more authentic. And I think that has leveled or elevated, I should say, the idea that diversity and equity and inclusion should be on everybody's minds, because it's kind of slapped them in the face, if you will. You also can't play office politics over Zoom. So we've got, like I said before, those little squares are all the same size. And that was also empowering for folks who maybe didn't feel as though they had a voice before in an office. Now everybody was on equal footing. They felt more comfortable to speak up at meetings. That has helped elevate, again, everybody's profiles. One thing to point out, Facebook does an annual diversity report, and they put one out in July. They said that they had the remote job offers that they had were more likely to be filled by people of color or people with disabilities, plus veterans and women. And that shows that, at least among Facebook, that there is some real progress that's being made in making distributed work or remote work equitable for all employees. Now, obviously, times are changing. We're starting to move back into the office, and there are some organizations that are adopting hybrid work environments as well. Some of the strides that have been made so far around diversity and equity and inclusion may unfortunately be impacted by this shift back into the office. Those who are hired in other regions or geographies may be forced to choose between where they want to live and where they have to live. Parents may be forced to pay for childcare again, which could be a financial burden. employees who have physical or mental disabilities or health issues may not be able to work in an office. And so companies need to consider these populations as they do make that shift back into the office. I hope that the benefits of having a workforce that is more diverse and equitable and inclusive will outweigh the desire, whether it's justified or not, of moving back into the office. So, I guess we have made some strides when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, thanks to the pandemic. There's your silver lining there. But I hope that we see a rollback, if you will, of some of these thoughts and programs and just general inclusiveness as we move back into the office, just because we're moving into the office.
Thank you, Charlene. And Rebecca, what are some workplace practices, such as ERGs, employee resource groups, that you have experienced make workplaces more inclusive?
Yep, thank you. Yeah, so I have some notes, so bear with me. My notes on this are, focus on the people running the ERGs. So it's not just having an ERG or a series of DE&I programming. It really makes a difference if the people running those are very passionate about it, because they will bring a lot more to it, and you'll get a lot more out of it. In my role as president of the Highland Pride Alliance, being a leader of an ERG helps me take members' concerns up the chain and have a part in the systemic change that we're making. I meet once a month with the executive sponsor of the ERG I lead. In those meetings with Debbie Conley, who's the Chief People Officer at Highland, we talk about what we can do to continue evolving the Highland Pride Alliance at Highland. We partner with and sponsor Plexus. We attend the Cleveland LGBT Center's Pride in the CLE annually and their Pride Ride. So we're doing a lot to not just do things for our immediate employees, but work with the community partners and further events that we can have with them and make it really attractive for people to come work for Highland and work in the Cleveland area. The biggest thing that I want to say for the people, the employees running your ERGs, do not forget to reward those people, because typically they are the people volunteering their time in addition to the job you are asking them to do. And in most cases, they're doing that for free. So, I always tell people, I have my day job and I have my gay job, and they're equally as competing for my time and attention. The thing that's kept me at Highland since 2008 is the fact that Highland's culture is based on the mentality that our employees are our family. And if you have that inclusive, right off the bat nature of your
recording
employees,
in progress.
Okay. We pride ourselves on calling our employees our family. Leading with that cultural mentality gives each individual employee a sense of truly belonging and allows them to bring their whole selves to work. Now, bringing your whole selves to work, if we unpack that, it means that your employees aren't worried about choosing the pronouns they use in referring to their partners. It allows them to focus on the job at hand and not having to catch themselves or tiptoe around things and be completely distracted by I don't know, photos that they might have of their partner, et cetera, on their desk, sort of thing. So being able to bring your whole selves to work means that you can focus on the job at hand, and it improves your overall team engagement and productivity by being able to focus and not have to worry about the external pressures that someone might feel, feeling like they have to stay in the closet, so to speak. So, also as president of the Highland Pride Alliance, I try for my members to bring programming that's timely and educational. So trying to make my events meet people where they are. Not everybody's 100% remote. Not everybody can jump on a live virtual session over their lunch hour. They may have to continue working the entire time. If you have those sessions, record them. Make it available for other people to consume. A lot of places have employees in other time zones, maybe global employee base. and being able to have that accessible for everyone really is beneficial. So some of the other things, not even just putting on events, but also there are things out there like TED Talks that have playlists of content of information that you can very quickly just copy, paste, and share with people to further the education aspect of your ERGs at work. I have twice a week meetings with my HPA members, and it's really a time to just hang out, socialize, and form that solid network of people and community that, since the pandemic, we aren't able to gather in person. We aren't able to just get in a room and talk. So I'm providing those avenues for people to meet, people that otherwise wouldn't cross paths in their normal day-to-day job. And I'm expanding HBA globally, so I have twice a month meetings at 9 p.m. Eastern with our people in Asia Pac. So that's one thing to do. Just have a meeting. Just have a meeting for people to show up. The other thing I wanted to touch on is specifically for the HPA group that I'm in. One of the things that I was able to bring to Highland was the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index. It is a tool that most people in the LGBT community are looking at to see if you as an employer are inclusive, if you're working on your own policies and procedures to make their work life as well as their outside of work life better. So this is a free assessment that you can get on as a company to evaluate what your HR policies and procedures are, to see if you need to improve them, if you need to tweak them. Let's see. The other thing I want to touch on is intersectionality of ERGs. I think, Rochelle, you had touched on the fact that people aren't just one thing, right? They are multifaceted human beings. So what we do at Highland is we have 6 ERGs. We have a mental health ERG, which is called Peace of Mind. We have women in networking, specifically geared toward women in business and furthering attention there. We have veterans ERG. We have an accessibility ERG, and I think I got them all. Maybe one more. Anyway, we have meetings in events where we bring the committees of those ERGs together and say, let's have an intersectional event. Let's have our multicultural ERG is the other one I forgot. Let's have an event where we are highlighting these intersectionalities. We are celebrating these intersectionalities. So I think that's very key as well. Earlier in the keynote that you had, I saw that there was a maturity model. I do not have a fancy slide for it, but I will speak to it real quick. So ERG Maturity Model usually starts out as a group of employees who want to form an affinity group where they're just hanging out, there's nothing formal about it, and then maybe they start getting serious and they want to start having events and promoting it to the whole company. That's where you have that formality with HR, create that ERG. Maybe that ERG then continues to expand globally, and they want to become a business ERG. That's usually called a BRG or a BERG. And then there's a next evolution beyond that, where that BRG's gotten to the point where all of your ERGs are in that realm, and you start to think about maybe we need a diversity department, and maybe we need to hire a chief diversity officer to corral all of these efforts. So that's the maturity model I wanted to speak to today. And coming back to the HRC CEI, you don't have to have an ERG to run that. You can do that tomorrow. You can go to your HR department and say, let's look at this. So the ERG is not contingent upon going down that path. And so some of the other things that we're doing at Highland, we're expanding our internship program to be a global internship program where we're trying to get students from universities and colleges around the world to internship with us and potentially become an employee. And we're also continuing our recruiting efforts from HBCUs, historically black universities and colleges. And the last thing I want to put here is we have ERG guidelines. So if you're thinking about doing an ERG, if you want to take this to your HR department, I can share the guidelines that we use at Highland with all of you. I'm happy to provide that. We are looking to improve it, but you're welcome to a copy of it. I'll give it to Lee to share with everybody if you're interested. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Rebecca. Wow, these have been 4 great opening statements. Please join me in thanking these 4 wonderful panelists. Thank you. Now it's your turn. So let me just open it up. Any questions you have for any of our panelists or the whole group? Anyone can speak. There's no order here, so please go ahead, sir.
Great conversation. Sort of working. Hello? Okay. Says it's on. There we go. So again, great conversation, a lot of good insights. So one of the things that you had talked about, I think it was Mike, you had mentioned early, is one of the values of diversity is to match your customer base. And then through some of the conversations, it's also trying to match your community base. One of the areas we challenge, which I'd like to see some insight on, is we're trying to bring diverse employees into our workforce. We're trying to focus on how do we develop that at the working level. But as you go up to your leadership teams, our leadership teams are often not as diverse as we want to be. And so how do we encourage that development of employees through through their careers to make sure we're developing diverse leaders? So it's one thing to educate our current leaders about how do they become an ally for diversity, but how can we really help develop people so that they can become those future leaders?
Thank you. Mike, is that you?
Yeah, you want to try first?
Yeah, I mean, so I know that was kind of a question to Mike, but I like some of the structural components of diversity have to start, with the top level, and then you have that trickle down effect throughout the organization. And I feel like with how we have it structured is we have an executive sponsor in place over each ERG, and that is a direct line to the top. That's like the red telephone to the top of the organization. But in this entire time working with this executive sponsor, I feel like she's been grooming me to become one of the diverse leaders within the organization. So some of those things happen naturally. Some of those you can put a complete structure in place for it. But every single ERG leader is essentially being groomed for that diverse landscape that we are evolving to as an organization.
Yeah, I would also just add, I talk to everything from startup companies to Fortune 500s, and kind of in the current talent environment as a CEO, COO, whatever, CIO. You not only have to be good at your primary role, but you have to be an HR expert, right? I mean, you have to take a hands-on role and a real interest in your team and your talent development programs and all that kind of thing. And you can't just put in an order for 10 people and expect to get back what you want, right? You need to be proactive about all this kind of stuff. And for some smaller organizations, that can be a challenge. It takes additional time and resources. But if you have the resources, or you should probably be investing more in it, more time and effort into it, and just being more hands-on about, are we getting the right people in? Are we going and talking to universities and K through 12 institutions and trying some of these different HR tools that maybe we haven't looked into yet? So I think just being more aware of what the current talent environment looks like and being more hands-on is one way to go.
Thank you both. Rochelle, please go ahead.
Hi, I would love to answer this question, and it makes me think of something we've been sincere in working on this past year at the National Society of Black Engineers, and it's this idea around decolonizing executive presence. So for our professional members, and as a part of our strategic plan, in getting more African Americans or persons who identify as Black into the CEO suite, it's not just the technical skills that they need, but what is that presence, that quote unquote presence everyone talks about when you're an executive leader? And how do we decentralize this idea of white supremacy culture in that, right? So we know that over the past 2 years, we've had to fight to get laws in place to allow us to wear our natural hair to work, right? Like, we have to get a law in place to keep our jobs if we have locks. And a lot of times, having our hair just styled this way really speaks to people believing that we don't have executive presence, right? What does it mean for companies to really see people and to see them in their full selves and not judge them because they don't present a certain way? What does it mean if companies don't count your Southern accent against you and thinking that, because you're from the South, then you lack a certain level of education, right? And so that's something I really want to challenge employees to think about. It's just really this idea of decentralizing those power structures and how you expect your traditional white male leaders to show up, but really making space for people to show up how they do every single day, knowing that they can still be executives and leaders within your organizations.
Yep. I also have one more thing to add to that, we work with a lot of the Chamber of Commerce groups throughout the region, a lot of the county partners, and not to knock golf, but it kind of amazes me still how every social event is like a golfing event, which you think about, okay, who grows up golfing, right? It's not the most diverse group of people. And so if that's where all the social opportunities are and opportunities to get FaceTime with your executives is, like, that's not really a great way to, make the diverse talent on your team feel welcome and feel like that you're a place where they could grow. So just always be thinking about that. Am I making my workforce and my team feel comfortable? Are the spaces that we're getting together and a meeting in places that everybody can feel welcome? So,
Thank you. Thank you all. Please go ahead.
I don't know if is this on? Okay, so I'm active in our company's recruiting efforts, and I'm openly going to admit that I profile stock our candidates, just so that we make sure as they are joining the company that they have a panel of interviewers that look like they do. They can immediately feel like, hey, you know what? I am a woman engineer. I'm being interviewed by a woman engineer. This is great. I'm very aware, though, that there are non-visual identities out there. And I'm wondering if you could share some best practices as we think about recruiting and having people at the table. How do we help with that intersectionality when we have those non-visual identities we're trying to address?
I can speak to some. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm working with in the HR department at Highland is making sure that all of the interviewers are trained to, when they introduce themselves, to use their pronouns, because you never know, and you shouldn't assume. So in those conversations, even off the initial phone call conversation, say, hi, my name's Rebecca, my pronouns are she, her. And that opens the door to make it safe for someone to say, my pronouns are they, them, which is, you can't just assume visually, right? I think it's wonderful that you're trying to pair visually with people, but having a panel of people to interview that person rather than making it one-to-one can also be, it could be overwhelming, but also might make it safe and comfortable. But that's just one tip that we're working on for our interviewers and the people in the job, hiring for that role. To make sure that they're using the same terminology so that it's continued throughout, so there's consistency in that approach.
Anyone else?
I think about little things to us, but maybe big to folks with hearing impairments. Always use a microphone. So if you're in a large room or space for an interview, always use a microphone, because that's an invisible disability that people do not take into consideration a lot of times. I also think about making sure that, I just lost my train of thought, but making sure that when you do have those interviews, that people really not only feel comfortable in that interview process, so just bringing in, like thinking about how you ask the questions, but also giving them an opportunity to shine. So it may not just be the round robin of questions, because you may have a different group of learners who, are really reflective. So they may be delayed in how they tackle some of your questions, but then also giving them an opportunity to present, right? So we can think about the learning styles of different folks and also incorporating that into your interview process.
Thank you. Thank you all. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, we have a question from our virtual audience. Rebecca's wondering what are some things companies are doing to help the hybrid workplace to make everyone who chooses to go into the office feel included, as well as people who choose to remain at home.
Thank you. Charlene, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can. I think that's still very much a work in progress. I think a lot of the companies that are going to be able to really successfully kind of transfer their DEI advances during the pandemic into that hybrid or even remote or in the office environment are the ones that really had a good idea pre-pandemic of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. Those folks actually, those companies actually did a much better job of transitioning to a fully remote environment during the pandemic because they didn't have all of these different hurdles that they had to clear. And those companies that didn't have a really good DEI plan in place beforehand, they actually learned much more about DEI during the pandemic because of the hurdles that were brought, the obstacles and having a fully remote environment. The companies that are coming back into hybrid or even in the office are really putting their diversity, equity, and inclusion to the test in the office, and they're looking for ways to kind of bring that back into the fold in a way that is non-intrusive, seamless, and just kind of slipstreams right into their work environment and have those conversations and be able to encourage people to bring their authentic selves into the office, whether they're working remotely or whether they're actually in an office environment. The main theme is to continue the DEI efforts that started remotely into the office, just make it a part of the vernacular, make it a part of the mindset, and just ensuring that folks do recognize that we're not the same people we were pre-pandemic. Hopefully we're better now, and because we can see each other through a much clearer lens than we did pre-pandemic. And I think having that mindset and being that level of awareness will help organizations continue their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts post-pandemic in the office.
Thank you. Anyone else, Mike?
Yeah, I think some of the companies that I've worked with that I think have been a little more successful at the hybrid work model, they're investing more in social opportunities for people to get together still, and whether you live in the region, being invited to weekly get-togethers, or even if you live somewhere else, being flown in a few times a year at least for a few days to meet with the team. Because if you're just working at home, it's pretty easy to just job hop around if you still sit at the same desk in your spare bedroom every day. So companies have been really hit by high turnover. So any opportunity you can get to build the real personal in-person relationships, I think helps. And maybe even more so than we did when we were in an in-person kind of environment where that just happened more naturally. So, and again, that takes time and planning and more maybe work for your talent team. But I think it's one way to make it more successful, especially for younger workers who are coming into a hybrid work environment where having your first job be remote or hybrid and not see your boss that often. I mean, that's a really tough environment to come into. So I think even if you're hybrid or you're remote a good amount of the time, still having some in-person component, I think, can be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Here's a question for everyone. Sometimes we perceive that tech careers are not accessible equally to all. What's your sense of that, and how can we change that narrative?
I can start. I mean, I think at one level, I know in Ohio, both in urban and rural areas, we still struggle with digital access. So, a lot of kids in the city of Cleveland still don't have the internet at their house. So how can you, learn new technologies and think about tech careers as a possibility if you don't even have that, as well as rural areas of the state. But I think just letting kids know you don't have to have a PhD in computer science. I mean, there's a lot of other opportunities to get into tech, whether you want to be on more the kind of visual design, UI side, whatever. Like there's all kinds of cool things that you can do that don't require you to just be a computer programmer. So I think that's one thing. I think getting earlier in K through 12, like I said, freshmen in college, letting them know that there's a wide variety of different opportunities to go into is a big thing that companies can focus more on.
Yeah, and I can I'm going to speak just to my own background of how to get into the tech realm. So I went to the College of Worcester. I was a studio art major with a focus in graphic design. I stumbled into the IT realm by looking for the highest paying job on campus. IT was it. And now I'm an IT project manager, very technical. I've learned how to do this job on the job, and it does not require a computer science degree at all. So I think even IT companies looking for those non-traditional technical graduates can really pay you dividends down the line.
Thank you. Go ahead, Rochelle.
I think the biggest challenge that I'm hearing from our members and students is just even being able to have the skills, knowledge, aptitude to get past those technical interviews needed for those tech jobs. So a lot of them have talked about how, they just don't have what's necessary to pass those types of interviews. So we've worked with a company called Carrot in their Brilliant Black Minds program to help train our members in being prepared for those tech interviews. So I think that is one big thing that, like, as companies and community partners and organizations come together, really thinking about how do they support these academic institutions, especially HBCUs, MSIs, HSIs, those traditionally underserved and under-resourced universities, to ensure that the students there have equal opportunity and access to these careers.
Go ahead, Charlene. Thank you, Rochelle.
I'd also like to remind folks that there are a lot of folks who are mid-career changers and are looking at tech now, might not think that they're qualified or that they have a place in technology because they were a pipe fitter or they whatever, they delivered pizzas. I don't know. But it's a different, they want to get into a technology career. They don't think that they fit, quote unquote, the profile because they don't have the right experience. They don't have the right education. But, especially in the cybersecurity space, what a great area for folks looking to get into tech to look at, because it is such a multifaceted technology, and there are so many opportunities in that space for people who have different backgrounds, come from different areas, have creative people who look at the world differently than others. There are so many ways to get into technology now that don't require a linear path that includes a college education. And I think organizations would do very well to open up their recruiting policies and procedures to enable those mid-career change, later life folks, non-traditional learners, those people to have a seat at the table as well.
Yeah, I think to add to that, that's a great, I think, potential talent pool for companies that they often overlook are, mid-career changers. But even there's, coding boot camps can still cost $10,000, $15,000 and require you not to get, you're not working for 2-3 months. So it's, are there ways to structure that to where you can get a stipend or get paid while you're doing that, so that people that might not have the funds to take that on can make that switch or have to support a family while they're doing it, that kind of thing. So there's things like apprenticeship programs, which people are familiar with from manufacturing, but you can bundle in a coding boot camp for 2-3 months, and then a year-long kind of structured program in tech to get you up and going in your career. And usually you make maybe a little bit less than a starting wage would typically be for that job. And at the end of it, the goal is, okay, it's kind of a training period, the company's invested in you and the boot camp program, and at the end of it, you enter as like a junior level employee. So there's things like that it's a way that somebody can still get paid, they can maybe take a chance on switching careers where maybe they otherwise would not feel comfortable kind of taking the risk of paying for it themselves. So just be more proactive and think about kind of some of those obstacles to get people to switch careers there.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Yes, go ahead, Professor Yu.
Yeah, so I have a comment. So we were interviewing a bunch of people for our project, the LER space. And I've been asking question for evidence if competence-based hiring actually does improve the pool of candidates and improve the DEI initiative at companies. There is no academic study that shows that it actually does improve the DEI or diversity of the workforces, simply because there is not enough data yet. However, the person at LinkedIn shared the unpublished yet working paper from their internal data. When the companies list their position with a specific competencies and skill requirements, they saw a statistically significant increase of non-traditional workforces and underrepresented population applying for the position. So I think it is important for companies to be specific about the skills, not just a high-level job description, if you want to improve the diversity of workforces and increase the overall pool of the candidates. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thanks. The reason for that is because when you give a very general description, many people might not have the confidence to think that they could do that job highly successfully.
Right.
They may not have the background to have thought that they could check all the boxes.
Exactly.
So by specifying what those boxes are and then restricting only to those qualifications that are critical to the work that has to be done, rather than just some broad, identification of generic skill sets, such as what Rochelle mentioned earlier, like presence, or some general descriptions, you're far more likely to get more diverse applicants. There are other things that can be done as well. I think one of our questions was, how can we make our panels that interview more diverse as well? Another person in the audience asked the question to start our conversation, how can we have leadership that is more diverse so that those who are applying for jobs can see themselves in those high-level roles? How can we train and encourage managers up and down the hierarchy to disrupt stereotyping and bias? How can we enable our criteria that we use for evaluating applicants, either for a hiring or a promotion, how can we make those not shift? We just stick to what we originally thought of as the important criteria and not allow them to move based on who's applying. These are all methodologies that we can use to increase the likelihood that we'll end up with a more diverse pool and select and actually hire more diverse populations. These are just such fantastic questions, comments, and discussion. I wonder if we can close out our panel by having each of our panelists give a closing comment, just a little bit of an encouragement or a summary of all of the things that are that we discussed around diversity in tech. Rochelle, why don't I start with you?
I would just love to leave everyone just really with a challenge to make sure that as you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that you really do get to the level of justice. It is no longer enough just to have a diverse body. We have to think about how do we make sure those diverse bodies are included? How do we think about those diverse bodies belong? But most importantly, how do we make sure that those diverse groups are really at a level of equity and justice, and we're able to just really make this country better for people who have been disenfranchised for over 400 years at this point. So just really, as you think about this work, please get to the level of justice and just really thinking about how we positively impact communities so that we can see a change for the better.
Thank you, Rochelle. Charlene?
I do a lot of conferences and, mostly moderating panels, actually. And the majority of the panels that I end up on or moderating have to do with diversity. And it's always been mostly about women in technology. And for a long time, I railed against it. I did not want to be I would always say, why do we keep having these discussions? It's the same thing for equity and inclusion. Why do we keep having these discussions? Why can't we just do it? Why can't we get it done? But the issue is much larger than just, okay, well, all right, I'm just going to be more diverse. And I realized as I'm doing these panels that there are a number of facets to these conversations, and they are necessary, and they're going to continue for what I expect to be a very long time. But collectively, we are moving the needle. We are so much better than we were 50 years ago. I hope that it doesn't take 50 years to get even better than where we are today. But I'm very, very hopeful. And this is a topic that will continue to be one of my favorites moving forward, just because it's such an important topic. And everybody has such a great point of view. You always learn when you have the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Don't ever think that your idea is the right idea.
Thank you, Charlene. Rebecca.
Yeah, so I have a lot of things running through my head right now. But ultimately, I think we've talked a lot about diversity in the people that you're selecting for your organization. And I think it's also important to square that with the diversity of thought that comes with that and might already exist. So leveraging that in every meeting you have, every interaction you have, is really important. In terms of my final thoughts, go to your HR department and ask to be on the HRC CEI, just as one thing. Go back and just see if you're even on it, and see if you can get rated on that. It's just such an attraction getter for the community, and you'll be surprised at how many more people in the community start applying for your jobs as a result. So,
thank you, Rebecca. And Mike?
Yeah, so Gen Z, so all the students running around the Student Center here, are the most diverse generation the country's ever had. So the companies that do the best job at attracting and retaining diverse talent will be the ones that are successful going forward. And talent is the lifeblood of technology companies. So if you can't grow your team and build the kind of team that you want to develop new products and take on new markets, you won't be successful. So that's the message from here.
Thank you. Wow. Folks, please join me in thanking this amazing panel. Thank you again.
Cool. Good job, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Diana, for facilitating, moderating the panel. We have a lunch outside, so I think we have a lunch for an hour. So please enjoy your lunch, and then we'll start the afternoon session here back. The wall will come down. The room will be divided into 3 separate rooms. So make sure that you do not eat in the middle of the room. So otherwise, enjoy your lunch. Thanks. Oh, Mike.